that is expanding. This is going to be a very special episode. If you're watching it right now, you'll notice that I'm walking around like I normally do. But essentially, I don't know. I'm trying to get the podcast to be bigger. And like everything that I try to do, my only strategy for it is like I don't really have any, I don't have a lot of good ideas, but I have a lot of ideas. So I'm just going to try a bunch of them out. And today, one of them is we're just going to walk around and talk to my brother and famous internet Lysenko historian for Chanches.
The
For
world's least
Chanches.
liked. Yeah.
So is
Sorry.
Evan, my brother Evan, he goes by Perchanches or Chanch online. We actually are coming off a very, I would describe it as wildly successful and world historically important r/Bill Simmons podcast where we talk about Zach Lowe and the NBA. Chanch, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I don't know if your podcast is going to gain more likability because for all of my friends, I think they all agree I might be like one of the least liked people online.
Honestly, so like I do so much worse in text. Like when I write things out, everyone fucking hates me. They genuinely do. I think it's a mix of my friends tell me I text like a boomer. You know, I use proper punctuation. I capitalize letters, and I'm very blunt with it. Like I don't know. I don't like mixing up words to try to convince you that I'm not mad at you or something like that. I don't know. But then also, you and I both use the internet in a specific way sometimes. Of
Yeah.
like, I want to have an argument. I want to fight with somebody. I'm going to go online and do it right now. You are adept at the arts, I would say, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. Again, universally despised, basically. I think I hit hardest with like 3 Twitter followers who like everything that I post. Other than that, it's pretty much mostly hatred, especially on TikTok.
Oh yeah,
Both
Twitter.
sides of the aisle, yeah.
Twitter fucking hates me. I can't get any momentum on Twitter ever.
Because you gotta pay for the thing. As soon as you like, unless you get like liked by an account, like if I ever get a logo to like a tweet, it goes off. But I don't tweet that much.
I just don't really tweet that much now that I do this all the time. But yeah, so for Chanches, obviously we have our very famous r/Bill Simmons appearances as the Chanch brothers. One thing I wanted to talk to you before we get to the thing that I told you we were going to talk about is I wanted to ask you, at what age are you going to show your sons, my nephews, the Adventures of Pete and Pete? Because I just did a reel on I think it was Hey Sandy, which is the name of this podcast. The name of my whole brand, Smiling Strange, comes from the theme song by Polaris, aka Miracle Legion. Yeah, when are you going to show my nephews the world of Pete and Pete? Are they ready for it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm building out, a television. What are those? What are they called? The old school TVs.
Oh yeah, CRTs.
Yeah, a CRT VR headset for Harry to wear and just have streamed in Adventures of Pete and Pete constantly. I was listening to the Backyard, the first album from Miracle Legion on the walk, and it's from 1984, so it's like almost, I don't know, 9 years before Pete and Pete was like in its full swing. So it's probably a good 7 years of band development for them before Polaris. And I was just thinking about how even the Backyard hits those nostalgic elements perfectly. The Jangle Pop does something for nostalgia that I just love. And the thing that's so funny about Polaris and Miracle Legion is that like they try to do like an REM type thing, but it really comes across totally different. Like I don't like REM, but I love
Same.
I love Polaris or Polaris or whatever it is, and Miracle Legion. There's just something so deeply nostalgic about his voice and the little jangly guitar key. I don't know. It's something magical about it. It's so good. But yeah, I don't know. As early as Harry wants to watch it, the thing that when you have kids is you're like, okay, well, did you watch Nick at Night, right?
Yep.
And it sucked,
all the time.
and you didn't want to like it. So like Pete and Pete feel like, have you ever seen a video of the 2007 Patriot highlights? It feels like it was shot in 1917. Like,
Evan, do you think like? What do you think I do whenever I need a pick me up? Is I just watch Randy Moss touchdown catches from 2007? That is like that is one
yeah,
of my go tos.
but it's like 15 pixels across, and you're like, wait, is
Yeah,
that how we watched it? So yeah,
yeah,
P&P is going to feel like, even though it perfectly captures the essence of childhood through like a Twin Peaks for kids aesthetic, uh, and like it also captures the basically the aesthetic of all of the 90s teenager core into a children's
yeah.
show, which I think it does great,
Oh,
but it
definitely.
looks like, it's going to look so different compared to the Bumble Numbs, which Harry is obsessed with, uh, which are three globs. If anyone has kids that's listening to this, young kids, there's a show called The Bumble Numbs, and it's on super simple YouTube, brain rot, and it's about three globs that say yum, 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 uh, and they have a secret recipe with a secret ingredient, and they have to go find that magical recipe and bring it back to the Bubble Numbs kitchen, and then they make it. But anyway, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
will they like it? I'll definitely be forcing them to watch it if it's still on
Oh,
YouTube
yeah.
or whatever it is. But I don't know.
I.
It's going to be like watching We Leave It to Beaver. I feel like it's going to be so far removed from their life.
Well, mom used to make us watch. Mom used to make us watch the Brady Bunch all the time, which I
Which
never
I
enjoyed.
liked.
I
Oh,
never. I
sorry,
thought
I
it was
liked it. I
boring.
thought it was good.
I think it's
Yeah,
fine. It's good to know, but I just was bored by it. I was bored by a lot of things. I remember Little Bear used to be like when that would come on TV, Nick Jr. back in the day, just like
uh,
literally that was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was so bored by
absolute
that show that I
nightmare.
almost
Yeah,
gave
it
up
was
TV.
terrible.
I think I learned how to read so I wouldn't have to watch that show anymore.
Well, you
Uh
mentioned in one of your pods, or maybe I forget, maybe it was a post. It's like the absolute peak conspiracy theory book for kids is like
yeah.
the Loch Ness monster, UFO, Bigfoot
Oh,
books, which are just, and Ripley's Believe It or Not. You just like had those two cross-referencing each other. Oh, beautiful thing.
dude, the conspiracy theory thing drives me crazy because it's like I don't know. I used to be into them back before everyone cared. Like now, I don't know how you feel about this, but like I genuinely feel that like now that everyone's talking about UFOs, now that the government's like, yeah, these are UFOs, I'm like, they're not real. I've never been more
Of
convinced they're not
course,
real than right now.
it
Now they're
sucks.
like, oh, it's awful.
Well, the one thing is like, all right, well, if the U.S. State Department has all these videos of the UFOs, I don't know, Russia, China, Iran,
Yeah.
all of Africa, every single other state, no one has anything better than this that we could. They also aren't flying drones 6 miles into the air 24/7 all the time. Uh,
And also at a time
I
when
can't get a better picture.
almost everybody is like, oh man, maybe the US having 800 military bases doesn't really serve any purpose for humanity in any conceivable way. It's like, well, what
Right.
if there were aliens? It's just, uh, Evan and I use a term we've coined years ago. My believometer is running on empty right now. It's at like
It's
a point 0.5. It's awful. I hate it because I've always wanted UFOs to be real.
I think it's, yeah, it's never been lower. And also the conspiracy itself turned less cool, where it's like very much similar to how uh, space in general seems less cool when they start redditing all these like kind of multiverse universe. It's like, okay, well, so now it's got reached the level of abstraction where I don't care. With like the interdimensional UFOs, I don't want dimensions to be affected by my UFOs. I want them to be space men from a different planet that came on a spaceship like
Yes.
pirates, and they fly around
Yes.
for no good reason. Like, I don't want them to be having a different dimension. I don't want to think about that because there's something intuitive about well, it's like, well, why would a different dimension even be stable enough for like these things to exist as they seem to do with these little capsules? I don't know. It just seems
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like, wouldn't the underlying laws of mathematics, physics, logic, like, wouldn't those also be kind of disrupted in a fundamental way, which we wouldn't be able to know it? And so I kind of lump that in with the interdimensional thing and kind of dismiss it outright. So it's just less fun. The
It's
only
also
fun
like,
UFO thing is the
go ahead.
Men in Black.
Yeah,
Now that's the only
100%.
one I want to know more about, because those things, that if you've never looked into the real Men in Black stories, there's only like five of them, which is why they're fun.
Oh, but they're
Is that they're
so
the
good.
scariest ones. They're so awesome. Oh man,
The like
they're
shape shifting federal agents and shit like that that just like say it's the best creepy pasta stuff you can read. I mean, it's why I've always liked conspiracy theories. Is like they feel like modern ghost stories. You know, like if somebody sat down and told you like, "Oh, I saw a ghost." Most people are like, "I don't really believe in ghosts," but he's like, "Dude, I had a credible experience with the Men in Black." All of a sudden, everyone's like, "All right, I kind of like." You need to have that believability. It's like the WWE. It's more fun if you think it's real. You know?
And also, it's like it builds on itself. Where when you believe the Mothman prophecies, then you go, well,
Yes.
what actually happened here? And then you read about how it may have been MK Ultra mass dosing an entire town, and all of a sudden it's fucking sick again. It's like great.
Dude, my defense of like why I give a shit about conspiracy theories all the time, because I do, I
Because
like
it,
genuinely. You and I have sent each other every
ugh,
conspiracy theory that was fun at all for like 25 years now. Any single
yeah.
time anything pops up, there's like this is fun. But we've talked about this before, where it's like, dude, in a world where like you are constantly bombarded with information, I am making more information to bombard you right now. That's what we're doing. Uh, it's very important to like flex the muscle of like your believometer and your bullshit meter and like being able to distinguish like, all right, that's clearly not credible, but like why it's not credible becomes an important thing to be able to like distinguish very early on. And I think like conspiracy theories are like these fun little puzzle games of like, all right, where does this actually break down? At what point does this thing go from a fun story about Mothman into like the actual reality that we inhibit? And now all of a sudden you're like, maybe it was MK Ultra. I don't know. That's like a real thing. So it's still fun, but it's that ability to test that muscle in your brain of distinguishing, seek truth from facts, right? That I think that's
Yeah,
important with
yeah,
conspiracy
definitely.
theories.
I
Uh,
mean, it's exactly what it is. You start to get an intuition for it. I think our favorite example was the expanding Earth, or the expanding Earth, yeah, theories of that planets basically start out small and they get bigger over time as like, and then they get stretch marks. And that's like what you see as like geological events. I was so excited to read about that for 2 days, but if you have no experience with letting yourself believe, you have to do exactly that. You have to let yourself believe for the
yes,
fun, and then a couple days later, you look at the rebuttals, and they usually make much more sense. Where,
I think
uh,
that's more of a take on like I was thinking about this. I almost wrote a reel on it. It's like when people talk about a healthy skepticism, they always talk about it as though like you should be very skeptical from the beginning, and that's how you have a healthy skepticism. I actually argue it's almost exactly the opposite. Like when you first encounter new information, have no skepticism at all. Go, this is true. When the guy blew up the balloon and the continents drifted farther apart on the balloon that he had taped
yeah,
on it, I was like, that's true. That makes perfect sense. How else did people get over to the Americas from wherever they were? There used to just be less oceans, and now there's more ocean. And like, if you let yourself believe, you encounter all the information that they have. And the funny thing is like instead of being more convinced by it, the more information you learn about it, the more it like does not hold up at all. And so it's like that's where the skepticism comes. I mean, I don't know. You can turn. We usually do a strategy of for 2 or 3 days, you fully wholeheartedly believe the conspiracy theory, and then after 2 or 3 days, you see how long it takes for that belief to hold up to scrutiny. And it's like it's genuinely like 15
yeah.
minutes most of the time, you know.
The
But
first
like,
argument is so brutal. It's like expanding Earth. You're like, all right, okay, yeah, matter. Things are on constant development. Why wouldn't the planets in this way? That
and
seems
that balloon was
plausible.
convincing.
Yeah, the balloon, that's science. The balloons, science uses balloons. That's scientific. But then you like look at the first piece of evidence where it's like, okay, well, people can measure the curvature of the Earth if it changed, if it is expanding, and it's literally never been changed. It's never changed in all of recorded history. So I'm like, all right, well, that's a pretty devastating blow into the expanding Earth theory.
It's always such a
And
bummer too, and it's like that's why you realize these conspiracy theories hold such weight. Is that like the secret knowledge, knowing the esoteric secret knowledge that the world is actually a balloon expanding or whatever, and that like the oceans are getting larger. You feel good. It feels good. You feel like a cool person. And then all of a sudden it gets ripped from you, and now you're just back to being a normal guy that believed in some stupid crap. It's such a disappointment, but I don't know. I kind of love that disappointment.
well, it gives you the same feeling that I think most people are having now with the socialization of the internet, which is that
Yeah.
through like stuff like I don't know COVID, the JE files, the broader disclosure of the tyranny of like monopoly and finance capital on the like the entire West. People have basically kind of been ripped away from the mainstream media and the kind of channels of information delivery that they've been used to. And now, like with the internet, especially when boomers come, it's like, okay, all this stuff has been laid bare
Yep.
through the flattening of all this information. So they're having the exact same experience that the people like conspiracy theories have, where it's like, if you believe in flat Earth for a moment, all of science, history are changed permanently. Like this is all
Yeah.
this has to change. This has to seep into every level of your like kind of awareness of all things. And so that radical change is now happening to everybody at some level in the realization of the internet and through being mediated through like this type of technology, this revolution, like the forces of production that is the internet. And so everyone's having this kind of realization to more or less some degree. I think there's a lot of reaction, like the kind of very strict anti-conspiracy theory of people. They're just kind of closing their ears and their eyes and be like, no, 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 don't like go
Don't
back
pop the
to the
bubble.
mediated, yeah, go back to the mediated information flow. Go
Well,
to the trusted sources, you know?
what's funny is I remember listening to, I think it was like a pseudodoxology podcast or whatever, or Widna podcast, whatever Compot's doing these days, where it's just, they're
Yeah.
talking about like the invention of the fiction of the world through the world's fairs, that like these massive world's fairs that they used to do in Paris and St. Louis, and the Chicago one gets brought up in a lot of conspiracy theorists because it was so impressive looking. But that like this is something that was funded initially by like Rockefeller institutes, and the same institutes are the same like funding sources that undergird a lot of the institutions that exist today. A lot of like university funding and stuff still comes from the Rockefellers. Scientific research, NGOs, it all comes from the Rockefellers. But like this idea of the world that was shaped by these world's fairs is the same mechanism that the idea of the world under the kind of mediation of institutions was shaped. And it's now, like you're saying, it's being broken up by the flattening of information via the internet. And what we've noticed is like now instead of kind of a mediated reality, it's a funneling system. It's a flat plane, and they just kind of funnel you into your little corner of information, and then leave you there to like bounce off the walls. Like you keep interacting. The algorithm is going to make it so that you keep interacting with the same people over and over again, the same ideas over and over again, and you have to do like real work to try to escape your own like algorithmically chosen bubble. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it does that, or it inundates you with a constant novel stream of schizophrenia to such a degree that you actually do have to reaffirm your own position, like in reality. It's like the
Yeah.
level of esotericisms that you can find on like X or whatever is infinite, basically at this point. And so at some point you have to go, all right, the Freemasons' cosmology as it relates to like astrology, I think I need to stop here because it's going to be too much. After this, there's no going
Yeah.
back. You know, I
Yeah.
I have to like put the brakes on it, and I
Oh
do that
man.
all the
Yeah. So
time. Where it's like, okay,
I think this is a good transition period here because it's like, first off, uh, welcome to the kind of conversation that has probably ruined a countless amount of car trips, parties. Anytime anyone has thought, oh, maybe we'll have Evan and Kyle together to hang out for a little bit. This is what we do almost immediately: is get caught in these sort of like rabbit holes or whatever. But trying to do with this podcast is sort of expand it into everything that I like. If you guys like the way that I talk about music, if you like what I do, where I walk around here and I come up with little thoughts, it all ties into the same process that makes us fascinated with like conspiracy theories or whatever. It is, I like to think of it as like an obsession with the development of things. Whenever something exists, both Chanch and I have constantly been like, all right, so like, where did that start? How did that come to be? Like, what domino was the first one to fall, and what were the subsequent dominoes to get to this point? Music, it's really easy to do that with because it's like you pick a band and you can hear they'll tell you what their influences are, and you go to those influences, they'll tell you what their influences are, and you can go all the way back to rhythm and blues or something like that. These kind of primordial musical essences always end up showing up. But the development of genre, the development of movements in popular culture via music. That stuff's really easy to follow for this. And so if you're into that kind of thinking, whatever, I think it's like a good place to start. But the reason for this specific podcast that we wanted to do, obviously to talk a little bit about Pete and Pete, but uh, Josh and I have been massively, massively fascinated for it's probably 2018, 2019, would you say?
I think 20, let's see, I moved out. Yeah, I think it was somewhere between 2017 and 2018. It was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's somewhere between then. Yeah, it started probably.
So since then we have been absolutely fascinated with the development of modern China. And for the most part, we've kind of kept that in close circles. We talk to each other. I have obviously, if you know me in Portland, Oregon, and you get talking to me at a party, at some point I'm gonna bring it up. It's kind of a meme, but I end up relating. You'll hear it in the podcast. I think I've mentioned Deng Xiaoping the most out of anybody in a music podcast in the continental United States in the history of podcasts. I'm only like 15 episodes in, but ultimately, we have thought for years now that the only thing that like really kind of matters politically, I know that's kind of a loaded sentence or whatever, is like your opinion on China. That like the development of China is the single most, I think Hegel coined the term the world spirit to describe Napoleon. And it's like the
Napoleon, yeah.
world, yeah, the world spirit seems obvious to us after years and years of stupid research. We've read a lot of books that were boring, honestly. Uh, that like the world spirit now lies in China, and really for the first time in modern history, since like 1945, the world spirit was in the United States forever. We were the ones that kind of drove culture, drove these things to happen. Now it seems to be shifting to China, and we just want to understand that thing. But talking about it with people, most people for the last really since 2017, when you talk to people in like 2018 about China and said like I think they're doing some things right, it was literally like saying like, oh, I think that Nazi Germany does some things right. Like there was a lot of real skepticism to my motivations if I thought they were accomplishing any of their goals or something, or I thought there's anything interesting about it. It seems to be changing for whatever reason. Chanch, you finding the same thing? Like the opinions
Yeah.
changing publicly?
Well, you said it was similar to like Nazi Germany. I would say it would be like watching Eraserhead and saying, I would like to live there. Because that was basically like the picture that was painted, where like China is this industrial, polluting wasteland. And like you mentioned Hegel earlier, it's like, well, when Hegel did make that reference about Napoleon, I think he was teaching uh, to like 8 students and mumbling incoherently because he was like developing his, much like we're doing right now, he was developing his phenomenology of spirit. And I think there's like the only transcriptions there from like people that took notes during his lectures, but he was
Wow.
borderline incoherent and would like kind of like be bounced around from job to job. And I think when Napoleon came, he made that proclamation, and then the school shut down. So he was like kind of a very weird guy. But like, yeah, I mean, as far as China is concerned, I think it's with the flattening of information, the internet. When it was 2008, a lot of this, like a lot of the rapid industrialization and the kind of smog cities, like everyone was inundated with
Yes.
smog cities and ghost
Go
cities, and
cities.
it's just even before the kind of more controversial things like in Xinjiang were brought
Yep.
up. It was the smog city. It was like you're working. It was the Foxconn factories, smog city, et cetera. And some of that still persists, but because the internet exists and because things like the when we tried to get rid of TikTok and then
Xiao
Redbook or
Hong Shu,
whatever,
baby.
yeah,
Xiao Hong Shu.
uh, and big Twitch streamers going on like Aisha Speed, etc. Like these have all kind of broken the down like the barriers for people to see it. And at some level, I think this is at least my and probably your interpretation of it. At some level, what actually exists in reality, materially
Yep.
reality, cannot be faked. And there is a level of newness and
Well,
advancement that is just obvious with when you look at like the shores of some of the largest tier 1 or tier 2 cities in
oh yeah.
1990 versus today. It's like a completely cyberpunk transformation
Well,
of the
on
world.
that point, it's like something that I've seen people say a lot is like somebody will do a Twitter post on like Shenzhen, and it's the cyberpunk city or Chongqing or whatever, and they'll be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
"Wow, that looks amazing," and then underneath it, somebody go, "Don't you understand this is just Chinese propaganda?" And previously, people would just kind of leave it at that. Now I'm seeing the response all the time is like, "All right, then show me the American propaganda of this. Like, make New York look like this, dude. Like, I don't care. What do you mean this is propaganda? Like, did they build the city just for this TikTok video? That seems insane." But
Well, I see a
before we
lot of
get,
people go like they don't build it right. Yes, they have high
yes,
speed rail, but like you're eventually they use poor quality steel or whatever that type of thing. It's like it's not
oh
good. It's not
yeah,
as good. We may have shitty 1910 infrastructure in the world's richest city that operates on an underground rat trolley, but it's the best we could possibly do because we care about the materials, Kyle.
the best we can. So that before we get into the what, I want to get into like the why I care about this because I've never really explained it to other people. I think they just think I'm weird, which is fine. I think
Yeah.
that's true. I think I am weird, but like the why has always stemmed from the same thing. We've talked about this a bunch of times. Uh, Essentially, like my theory of the American political spectrum is that both the left and the right are kind of undergirded by the exact same idea that like no one on the Republican side or the Democrat side really thinks America is like ideal utopian, right? They're all very pragmatic. They all say the same thing though. They say, listen, this isn't the best thing that's ever happened, but it is the best possible thing, right? That like, oh, America is slow to build, slow to develop. We're, doing this or that to the American citizens. It's like this is just the best you could hope for. Like don't rock the boat too much because then it could only get worse. If we tried anything too dramatic, it could only get worse. And I think this is like really what accelerated our interest in China is like we recognized even back in 2017, 2018, that like there was a trajectory that China was on that at a certain point like was either going to prove all of the naysayers right by leveling off at exactly the same level America is at. And just everything would look exactly the same in China as it is in the United States, because this is a natural limit on this kind of progress and growth. Or uh, the trajectory belays a bigger truth that it's like China is going to get past us in some ways. These things that are developing now aren't going to stop when they get to the same level as America. They're actually going to go past. And you and I were talking about like even back in 2020, 2021, it's like if China is able to have materially better things, not everything in China is better than everything in the United States, but just to materially have some better things than in America, it literally strikes at the core that holds our political system together, this idea that nothing could be better than it is. And I think the big one you see is like in America, we cannot build high speed rails from San Francisco to LA. We can't do it. They've been spending trillions of dollars on this thing. Nothing's actually been built. Whereas in China, they've built twice the amount of high speed rails that Europe had in since 2008. So from 2008 till now, they've built twice as much high speed rails. And that's what people are seeing. And it's like, that alone is in itself kind of revolutionary to the understanding of America's place in the world. It is no longer the best of all possible worlds. It is one place among other places, which I think is like multipolarity, but we can get into that later. Chanch, what do you think about the idea that like just seeing things in China that are enviable has this sort of effect culturally on America as a whole?
Well, I think it strikes at what is held dearest to most Americans, especially the either boomers now or the older generation, and then millennials like us and Zoomers, is that maybe it's less prominent with the Zoomers, with Gen X parents, but there's the idea that everything would get better for your children, that there was like that
Yeah.
things would continue to develop. The kind of whole limiting factor of this broad notion that this is the best we can do is essentially a sort of American pragmatic re-articulation of Francis Fukuyama's end of history. This is the end
Yes.
of development. As things get more complex, development has reached a kind of stasis or mediation, grand mediated point from which if you either agree that this is kind of like a natural equilibrium, as you said, or that things get so complex in these type of sophisticated societies that this type of mediation is like really the only thing keeping us from like barbarism or something along those lines. So this is the best we can possibly hope for. China simply flies in the face of that because they have continued to develop. There is a sort of hyperstitional awareness in China that the future is calling to you from the present, and that this thing is a better and more positive outlook on like the creative potential of mankind. And we see that reflected through their ability to like build cities. They poured more concrete in like 2013 through 2016 or some 3-year period, might have been 2010, 2013. They poured more concrete in that 3-year period than America did in 100 years. So it's
Yeah.
like I believe that that means something. That is some sort of that's something you can see, you can touch, you can interact
And
with, you can plan for, etc.
I think that gets down to like you and I have talked about, because in part a lot of our arguing with people online is obviously very political, but it is you know we have I think argued across the political spectrum in a way that most people don't really do. People that consider themselves very far right, people that consider themselves very far left, and uh, people's internal idea of like what they are politically, you can say whatever you want. Your actions and your beliefs are really more important than your own personal label for it. That's sort of something we can talk about here in America is like the need to be in control of defining terms. But you and I have talked a lot about the political spectrum not being the sort of like left right authoritarian versus libertarian mentality that you see a lot in the West. I literally just look at it as a graph paper, right? Where one of the coordinates is China doing something fundamentally different than the West? Yes or no? And then the second quadrant is the thing China doing good or bad? And that I think everyone's political ideology, this is, I think, genuinely the single most important political issue. Everything else is kind of downstream of this, of like, is China different and good? Is it different but bad? Is it the same and good? Or is it different and bad? Will kind of put you into one of these different political camps. Uh, I don't know, Chanch, do you want to explain
And
that
the
more, or should I?
language, well, no, I mean the language of it's like, is it different? You know, are they merely replicating uh, American modernity in the post-war era? Based on an advantage of being second to market, essentially, that there
Yes.
are these things have already been developed, or are they doing something fundamentally at the level of planning and the level of superstructure, which is like politics, civil society, etc.? Are they is the superstructure reflecting some sort of qualitative or base difference? Like, do they have something that is driving society, driving a next generation of both politics, civil society, and planning that is qualitatively different than we do in America? I obviously side with the latter in this.
Well, the thing is, I think we both started out because we went through, universities and shit like that. We lived in the Northeast. We're aware of, the sentiments of the consensus opinion, the consensus of
Yeah.
expert opinion being the kind of ruling ideology in the West or whatever. And we were part of it. It's like, I think excuse me, when I started doing this, my mentality was China is the same, that it's like just capitalism. They went to capitalism when sometime in the 80s, and it's actually probably a little bad. It's like ultimately there's some good, but it's probably a little bad. And it really was like 2019, 2020 that like the nihilism of that started to drive me insane. That like this idea that it's like, okay, so everything is just going to get worse forever. My kid's life is going to be worse than mine. Their kid's life is going to be worse than theirs. There's no hope that any of this stuff can change because it's all sort of an inevitability. Uh, and I remember thinking at a time, like I actually emailed professors of economics departments of every Ivy League school. I was like, I need to know about the Chinese economy. This is the point where I'm like, I have to learn how how economics works. And I emailed them. I think not Stanford. It's the one in New York City. Uh,
NYU or Columbia?
Columbia. The Columbia professor was the only guy that got back to me, and he gave me this book on the Chinese economy in 2020 during the pandemic. It was a long book, it's like 800 pages, but it was written in 2002. And throughout the book, all it did was compare China to what they thought at the time was the most comparable economy, which was Brazil. And it's
Oh,
like,
right.
okay,
Yeah.
if in 2002 we're talking about China and Brazil, and like they're talking about, it's like we don't really know which one of these is going to pan out. I was like, all right, and this is the best response I got from a guy who works at Columbia. That was the moment where I was like, all right, I don't know how the fuck I'm going to do it because I don't speak Chinese. I have to find Chinese sources. I can't go through this anymore because these people were wrong. The people that wrote that book, making comparisons between Brazil and China, they have been proven in reality to be wrong. But I don't know who wrote that. So I don't know if they're still writing stuff because there's no accountability in these departments. Once you're a China expert, you're a China expert no matter what China does. So these people that wrote about this in 2002, they might be writing about China in 2020, and I can't like trust that they've learned anything from what I'm viewing as like a massive, massive oversight, a massive mistake. I think they were just wrong, and that was the point where I was like, all right, I have to find Chinese sources. And that led me to Wang Huning's America Against America, which I read originally on a
So good.
forum, uh, where just some woman was just translating it on a random forum. And like every couple of days, she would post a new chapter of America Against America. Now you can get it as a book. But Chanch, you want to explain America Against America and also your thoughts on
Very,
like
I
finding
mean,
Chinese sources?
well, it's very funny because that I remember you you forwarded me the email of the guy, even more hilariously, which was I think it was the guy at Harvard, and he was like, "Well, you should read The Economist, the magazine," and it's like, okay, you're an academic. You are you
Yes,
just reading The Economist? This is the smartest people that we have in the U.S. is just downstream of a popular
it's a rag.
a British, politics rag, yeah. So I think that that
It's a
was
rag.
laughable even at the time, and also laughable considering that there are actually very easily and free sources that you can find from the Chinese perspective. Like you can just Google Deng Xiaoping, what he said about reform and opening up, and
Yes.
why they were doing it, and what it was. The governance of China is all free. The socialism of Chinese characteristics, etc. Uh, these things you can read, and it's from their perspective, so it's obviously biased towards them. But yeah, I found that like absurd and ridiculous to the point where I remember it like 8 years later.
Well, real
But
quick, I want to talk about the bias thing because it's like that's what people
yeah,
will point out. It's like you're going to read a biased thing, and I'm saying it's all biased. You're getting the Economist is
yeah,
very clearly biased. Like you can go through essentially just who funds the Economist, who funded it from the beginning, what was their goals. That is their bias. So it's like if I'm going to read bias, I'm just going to instead of having try to find this perfectly articulated middle ground by basically written by God as a casual observer from the third party, I'm just going to read the biased shit from both sides. And I will have to find, at the time, I didn't know how to do this. But at the time, I remember believing like I will just have to find a way to test the biased theories against reality to figure out which one was true. Because you can have bias, like I can have bias and still be right. You can have bias and still be right. Bias does not inherently make something wrong. And that's one of those points that drives me absolutely fucking insane. It's like people assume that
yeah.
because you have bias, it's like you're nullified, your opinion's nullified.
Well, this is like, and it's like to bring it back to Chinese history. Mao Zedong, if you don't know, the founder of the leader of the Communist Party of China from 1949.
If you don't know who
He
Mao is and
wrote a
you've
book
listened
called
this far,
On. Yeah, yeah. You're definitely. But like he writes a book called On. He wrote these two works, On Practice, On Contradiction, and it's like, well, how do you know when something is real? It's like you have an idea, theory about it. Well, you know the reality of it by bringing that thought, that theory, that idea into reality practically. And there is a transformation that occurs if you are more or less right, if you're more or less wrong, in any way, shape, or form, that there is a mediation that reality does to like an idea, that it interacts with the idea, that by prescribing this idea into reality, that it changes in some way. And then this is like where the actual truth is. So to relate this back to like the bias versus non-bias thing, it's like you can have a bias, but in reflecting on the actual world, actual reality, as things actually are, then this will tell you what the truth is. For example, you cannot not like you can say I'm going to build 800 million square kilometers of high-speed rail. Well, did you do it?
yes.
Yes or no? Ultimately, you kind of have to agree that yes, this does exist. And so, in order for it to exist, it had to have been achieved in some way. Through some
And
means,
so
and
a
that's
way to
kind of
test
where the
that
investigation occurs.
one way to test that is to do something like, let's say a government decides to release what they're going to do every 5 years since 1949. And then you can test
Yeah.
the stuff they said they were going to do against reality. These are called the Chinese 5 year plans. They are publicly available to everyone across the globe because this is every 5 years. The Chinese Communist Party basically comes out and says, this is what we're going to do. Good luck. And then they try to do it. And it's like they succeed or they don't succeed. I think the thing before we get into like the weeds of all this is like, I really want to emphasize to anybody listening to this, to anybody that thinks like I'm a smart guy I think I'm articulate. I don't necessarily think I'm too bright. Chanch and I here are C students, D students. We were awful at
At
school.
best. At
Absolutely.
best.
You did
Yeah.
what we like to call in the family your victory lap year at college because you had to do another run to get it
Well, I
completed.
hit for the cycle. I got every single grade from A to F as an official final grade in a class,
And
including both
we've
pass and no pass for those classes that
oh
you
no pass,
those
no pass
beautiful
is hard.
no pass is
No
tough.
pass
It's
is
a tough
hard.
pill to
Yeah,
swallow. It's a tough
yeah.
one.
I got an
But it,
NP.
yeah,
Uh,
but you mediate that through like, all right, the no pass deadline is here. I am failing, so maybe I can get this to like a C or whatever the no pass thing. All right, this is my new goal. But
yeah.
then so it's like a continuous. You have to you have to debate with yourself whether that happens. So yeah, it's always a pretty stiff blow, but it's never a total shock.
Not pass is a choice you make every single week. An F is something you might be able to pull off in like 2 bad months. A no pass
Yeah,
is a choice you make every day. You wake up, you go, I'm not going to pass. It's not going to happen. Just not going to do it. But anyway, like,
yeah.
so the point I'm trying to make is like through this idea, really through this like nadir I was in of like just nihilism of dude, nothing's gonna get better. This shit's we're doomed. It's just gonna suck forever, and then we're gonna die. Nothing ever changes. I got obsessed with this idea of like, well, maybe China is somehow different. And literally, it's like every single thing that I read did two things. One, it confirmed my idea that something was categorically different happening in China. And number two, it made me have to read way more stuff. But unlike in school, where they gave me my P, no P grades or whatever, and the way that like school kind of talked about learning was very like, it's very like metaphysical. Like learning is you put information into your brain and then you expose it's like saving a file into your hard drive just with a little bit more extra steps or whatever. In this way, when I started trying to like discover China and trying to work through all the stuff that's out there online, what was good, what was bad, uh, it felt categorically different way to learn. Like it was much closer to like drawing a narrative than it was to memorizing facts. And in doing that, it unlocked all of this other stuff. I've read a million economics books at this point. I have read the majority of the canon of like Marxist Leninism, which if you're a leftist in the United States of America, you might understand like, oh, you have sympathies towards those ideas, but the idea that you have to read them, that like it's a requirement, uh, doesn't really exist in the West. Most people think it's like you can have a passing interest, you can like listen to somebody talk to you about state and revolution, and you get the gist of it. But like for the first time in my life, I was like, dude, I actually have to read this. I have to come up with my own opinion on this thing. And it's like all this comes from just the idea of like, it feels important right now. Before I knew why it was important, but it felt important in the moment to figure out what the fuck is going on in China on like a world historical stage. I don't know. You find the same general idea?
Yeah, I find the same general idea, and I think that what has really accelerated this are like that there's been right the arguments against it, and one of them is like that China is essentially Japan.
Yes.
That Japan and China are basically the same thing, and that China will hit its Japan inflection point. It's what was it called? The Plaza Accords in
Yeah.
1985, I think it was. Uh,
The middle
where
income
like base
trap is like the general trend.
Yeah, yeah. And so it seems that question seems to have been resolved, but there were like two other major inflection points. And this one is like the second one is obviously new, but the first one was the financial crisis of 2008. And I remember reading a book by Paul Krugman around the same time, which is called
Oh,
End This Depression Now, because this is where I was at. Like this is it's like End This Depression Now. He's basically making the Keynesian argument of like, well, we no one has jobs and everyone's miserable because it's like 2009 or whatever. And what we should do is that there's a million infrastructure projects that people want, from filling potholes to building bridges to building trains, etc., to increasing renewable energy, all this stuff. And we should just pour all of the money. We should print money in fiat, and we should pour all of this money into doing that. And I was like, this is a great idea. We should definitely do this. Everyone would everyone love this, and just it never happened. And so when come around to the point with the China stuff, you realize that one, like, this is kind of what they do a little bit. Although their justification through it takes a
Yeah.
Them. So yeah, this is basically how China does infrastructure. They print money through their banks, which are controlled by the state, basically. And this is how they do it. They build everything on credit, which is how it works in America. So
Yeah.
they actually like plan and say we're going to build high-speed rail, and they do it, as opposed to like it has to be mediated by a million private interests. But yada yada. Anyway, the point is that when you learn about China, you realize that one of the big reasons that the West was bailed out of the 2008 financial crisis was that all of this printed money was actually taken in by China, and they basically were the buyer of global currencies, and that it helps America stabilize during quantitative easing. That is just to say that 2008 was a major inflection point for the West and for this type of development, and also in the development of China, but also most importantly for what we're talking about now is that COVID happened. COVID changed the world in that COVID put everybody, outside of all of the kind of fractures of the political economy, et cetera, through like trade and inflation, yada, yada. But more importantly, COVID put everyone online. And through being online, you get to see things like what does it look like in China? What are they doing there? How are their cities developing? How is their social life developing? How is their like, what is it a real place? You're all of a sudden everybody is dumped into this new era of socialization, and I think this also the kind of dovetailing development of both America and China during COVID shows you another like inflection point on like why do people care about it now? Well, it's probably like a lag from what COVID did.
I totally agree with that. I just want to talk real quick on the Paul Krugman point. And this is like a pattern we started to recognize as we started reading more, learning more about China and like China's perspective and all that. It's like Paul Krugman in 2008 writes, we should do this. We should take the money and we should dump it into infrastructure. There's no article from Paul Krugman saying, hey, I was right, we should have done that. And I know that because that's what China did. No one ever they always point out the problems, they give their solutions, and then they just kind of hope that saying a solution out loud will generate enough public support that it'll put pressure on politicians to do this thing. There's no real investigation from a guy that he has a Nobel Prize or something, like Pulitzer, some sort of.
Yeah. He is a Nobel
There's no
Prize,
investigation. Yeah. He felt no need to go, okay, well, if I think my idea works, where is it working right now? This is something I see a lot with talking to anybody online about politics. When they want to give a comparison point, they immediately start going into the past. They start talking about like, well, in 1923, we did this. In 1848, we did this. And it's like, well, those things are useful for kind of painting a picture of like how this could work. But the world economy of 1987, is different than the world economy of 2026. The world economy of 1887 is wildly different than the world economy of 2026. So even though it is a good comparison, there could be a better comparison if anyone's doing it in reality right now. And so it's like, this is, again, where the China stuff becomes somewhat important to me, is that every time I think that, like with China, it's like, I think we should use public money to build infrastructure in the United States of America. I think that's something that most people agree with, that it's something that we could do and we should do. When people say, well, that wouldn't work because it didn't work, this is what happened when they tried it here, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I feel like it's more compelling for me to just go, well, I think it does work, because look at Chongqing, which is a city that 5 years ago, nobody in America would have been able to tell from a made-up city. Like, it literally just sounds like you're making fun of You're making fun of a
You're
Chinese
doing a
accent.
Shane Gillis,
Well,
yeah.
it's a Shane Gillis thing, and it's like, but now it's like it's on the tip of the tongue of a lot of Americans because they can see it, and it's happening right now, and it's like, oh well, why doesn't And again, Chongqing to compare to like the United States of America, this is not their New York City, this is not their Los Angeles, this is not San Francisco, Silicon Valley, the richest cities in America. This is their St. Louis. This is
Yeah.
nothing. This is just a city, and it's like, I think that is the most important thing with China and the success of China, and why it's like, again, I actually don't want anyone to agree with my stance on China. I don't care. I really don't. I've argued with enough people that I just don't give a shit. You can call China whatever the fuck you want. You can say it's doing whatever you want. You can fall on that political spectrum in whatever category you want. I am just saying that it seems very obvious in 2026 that knowing what is going on in China is important in the same way that like knowing what was happening in America in 1955 was important, even if you lived in a different country, right? That this is going to shape the world you live in. And so it's just important. You should know,
Well, it runs into this contradiction of like, okay, well, we know in America that we at least have the most money on paper. We have a lot of money. We're the richest country on earth. So
Yes.
what is the money for? I think this is what is what is the money for? What are we doing with this money? Everyone accepts, I think, even the Chinese, I'm sure, accept a level of like corruption and kind of greasing the wheels, or even some inefficacies, because that's the development of society. I think most Americans are accepting. They're probably a little bit too accepting of like that things will not be perfect. But at the end of the day, what is the money for?
What is the money for?
I don't know what the. I really don't know what you can point to as a millennial that has been better over time as an American. The internet, maybe.
Dude, I remember talking to Dad, our father,
Yeah.
at one point years ago. It was like 20, when he was kind of grilling me about, my weird obsession with China. I know I'm weird, guys. I'm aware of who I am. I'm fully aware of that, But like, when he's grilling me about that, and he's sort of like, well, why are you so pessimistic with the American government? I was just like, dude, I'm like 30 years old, man. In my lifetime, it's never done anything. There's like things that like Obama did that like on paper make sense. But it's like, it takes like a real effort for me to recognize it as something that affects my life. It's got like these downstream effects or whatever. But for the most part, every time you've literally just wanted the government to act, it just doesn't do it. It doesn't seem capable of doing it. So I don't know. I don't really have any fealty to this system because it seems indifferent to me. It seems indifferent to everyone I know. It seems incapable of doing anything other than indifference or like inflicting more pain. And from Dad, he grew up as cusp Gen X or whatever, but like he can remember projects that the government accomplished. He can remember things.
Yeah.
He has fond memories of the moon landing and stuff like that. Like he has these memories that create a bond to that system because it performs something to him. And it's like, I don't think he'd ever realize. I don't think a lot of people over 45 really realize like the enormity of under your entire lifetime, nothing really improving, or the government not really doing anything except more wars and shit like that. Like, obviously, that is going to have those people are going to have a different relationship to that system than people that like, I don't know, this obviously isn't that, but like benefited off of the New Deal or something like that. Those people are going to have a much different relationship to the government. And honestly, it's one of those things that like, again, when you start researching China, a lot of it comes off as kind of weird and creepy. And it's like, why do all these people have pictures of Chairman Mao on their bed, like in their room, in their house? And it feels like somebody's forcing them to do it. But when I think about it, it's like, well, if I was a dirt poor peasant, and by the time I died, I had a retirement account and a furnished house, and my kids were in college, whoever I thought was responsible for that, I would have very favorable opinions of. I would think that that is a good person, maybe have a picture of them.
Yeah.
Plus, mix that with Chinese civilizational DNA,
Well, to tie it back to Pete and Pete, the first episode, King of Rod, they're going to the Hoover Dam. They're going to observe greatness. They're going to observe the transformation of nature by man, a willing participant in this grand project. taken upon by society. It's like it's a monument
The
to like
conquering
this type
of
of
nature.
development.
Yeah. They conquered nature on behalf of
Yeah,
all people. That's the Hoover Dam. You know? And now in China they have the Three Gorges Dam. You know, they have their own version of this thing. And I just like honestly the thing that gets me is just like I don't know. We've talked about this a million times. In China, China's like one of the only countries in the world right now where people think that the next 50 years will be better than the last 50 years, right? They're one of the few countries that actually believe that. Two of
they're
the other countries, by the way, are Vietnam and North Korea. So it's like everyone else, though, thinks things are going to get significantly worse. And it's like, I personally think that the future tends to belong to the optimists. The people that think things are going to work out tend to be right. And two, I'm envious of that. I want to live in a country where everyone around me thinks things are going to get better. And I want that for here. I want that for America, you know?
Yeah, I think there's just a common denominator of like, do you believe in the creative potential of mankind? And to be unleashed, like if you were to unleash everyone's creative faculties, would this be positive or negative? I think ultimately most people would agree that this is a positive thing, and that there are very few obstacles that like could not be solved at this like this level of like liberation, freedom to explore creative solutions and problems to all manner of things in both like aesthetic and art, and then politics, statescraft, and production. All of these things, I have faith in like people to like achieve, and I just don't see that faith being. I don't see, like Gen Z is the least patriotic generation in America, and Gen Z
Yep.
in China is the most nationalistic and patriotic. They're actually more patriotic, they're more nationalistic than their parents. So take a conversation with your, boomer mom and and she's going to talk to you about JFK or whatever. Like these are just this is the inverted conversation the Zoomers have,
Yeah,
so
it's an
it's gonna be
inverse thing.
it's very interesting. I don't think
I,
people believe. I think that there's a level of mistrust that people view this as a sort of brainwashing. This is an ultimate
yes.
effect of like people will just flip this and be like, well, they're actually just the most brainwashed, the sophisticated Chinese panopticon of government surveillance has simply like cybernetically changed these people's brains into being like they're getting better at this totalitarian
I've
thing.
had
Whereas I ultimately, and I think you'll agree with this, like, right, you agree,
yeah.
and this is a huge light bulb moment for me about all of the kind of authoritarian regimes or whatever. It's like, it is basically impossible to govern people in an authoritarian way when they don't want it to be. And they know that their material conditions are bad. In examples in
Yes.
history from which people have tried to prescribe a sort of ideal onto society that is rejected or doesn't align with their kind of material interests, it almost always fails very quickly and immediately. Like, even if you look at like Nazi Germany, that did not last 10 years.
No,
Like
yeah.
that.
It did not
It
last
was
long.
because it couldn't, because it structurally could not. They had to, with all their
Yeah. And
expansionist goals or whatever.
well, we also now know why it couldn't have survived on like a financial level with like banking systems. This is stuff that like
right.
eventually I like want to talk to. But on the point that you're talking about, like the point that I always bring up with people is when they're like talking about like, well, the Chinese government, they make the people say these nice things. They make them swear fealty to the government. And it's like the two things I bring up was a study done by Harvard University that has no right to publish anything, no reason to publish anything pro-China ever. They have no bias towards this. That said 95% of Chinese approve of the federal government, approve of the Communist Party in general, right? Again, compare that to American approval ratings of Congress, and it's wild. But then,
It's
like
like
when people bring up, it's like
18%. Yeah.
that number is too high. So it must mean that they have like mind control powers. I always bring up the same thing. For the last 30 years in China, every 7 years, your take-home pay on average has doubled. For a Chinese citizen, every 7 years, their take-home pay has doubled. If the Republican or Democratic Party doubled your take-home pay every 7 years, would you vote for them every single time? Like, would you have what would your approval rating be of that party if they paid you, if your life increased that way, that linearly? Like, it's just, I know it sounds like an absurd number here in America, but just try to like put yourself in the shoes of an average Chinese citizen. It's like I don't know. I don't know what I might have like nitpicks with what the government does here and there. And there might even be people that have like legitimate grievances because of some actual tragedy. That I'm not denying anything. I'm not denying that anything bad has ever happened in China. I am just saying that on a whole, it kind of makes sense to me why these people would have this view of this government, because it seems to be working for them in a way that is now becoming obvious to American citizens, which I think has it has the ability to like attack a structural belief of the American political system. Again, that belief that like nothing is different than this, nothing is better than this. We just gotta hope that it doesn't get worse. And I think that is now like in flux. That idea is in flux, and I'm very interested to see how that like plays out in the next 5-10 years in American politics and American
And you can
culture.
see it. Yeah, I mean, you can see the tendrils of its influence impacting everyday Americans, where there is a huge push to reindustrialize America. There
Yeah.
is when we were growing up, it was very much it was like this is the idea economy, and I think this kind of crystallized in Silicon Valley in like the early internet boom, and really like the Obama era internet like boom, which is like, oh, this is where the production comes from. We're the idea generators of the world, and we now basically own the internet. We have like taken this thing and through our ideas put into this like software. Like it's literally software. It's like the expression of ideas through code, basically. That this is like the new economy. Well, the contradictions of this were basically immediate in that there was the commons that were enclosed upon by this very same productive like force of the internet. And now I think people are in something like seeing China's rapid development and especially their industrial development. They're like, well, we should do that here. And I think that it's again, this is a way where it's like kind of impossible to completely squash and quell. I think that this type of sentiment is only going to increase over time, and I think that they're going to have to. There's going to have to be some concession in regards to this. It's just going to be in what form does this take? Is this going to take the form of like the UBI enshrinement of profits in America that will appease the citizenry? Or will they fight it tooth and nail? I don't really know. I have my guesses, but I don't know. It just seems like that you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube on this type of thing.
I think that ultimately, like we're in agreement on this thing, and I think the reason that we are saying kind of confidently here that this sentiment towards China is going to change is because again, we have been looking into this for a long time. Not saying that like I'm an expert on somebody that might have like a PhD or something. I don't want to argue about credentialism. I am just saying I know I've read a lot on this, and I have seen in real time how much it has shifted, how much that idea has shifted from being very negative when you talk about China to being much, much more open right now. People are starting to say stuff that I was saying like 5 or 10 years ago. But anyway, this has been an hour. This is a different type of podcast, obviously, than what I've done in the past. But what I just kind of want to say here, go. All right, so sorry I cut out there for a sec. But what I was just trying to say is I understand that this might not be the reason that you come and listen to my podcast, you watch my reels or anything like that. Obviously, I talk about music a lot more, kind of talk whatever I want to. But genuinely, I believe that the appeal that I tend to have online is that I am not an algorithmically sortable product for the most part. I stick under indie rock right now because that's where I've had some success, but I try not to like focus in a way that plays into that algorithm whatsoever. So if you like that aspect of it, if you like the fact that like I come off as somebody that maybe has some interesting ideas, whatever, again, it makes me feel like I'm being very arrogant about the quality of my ideas, but I'm mostly just focused on the idea that like, I do not want to be algorithmically sorted. I don't want to be part of the algorithm. And if you enjoy that at all, you kind of have to let me do podcasts like this. You have to let me make reels about sports or China or Pete and Pete you guys would love, but I'm going to try to make some movie stuff. My idea right now is like the podcast was started just because I thought it was a good idea to do it. Now I want it to grow. And again, to quote Deng Xiaoping, if you want something to grow, you have to let 1,000 flowers bloom. So there's going to be some bumps along the way. I'm going to throw a bunch of ideas out there and just see if I can start to build on this stuff. Ultimately, though,
Well, what was the
ultimately
intro to the Bill Simmons podcast?
I can't even remember. What did
It's
we
like a
say?
mature conversation that occasionally touches on adult subject or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, ultimately, until I get paid by this, I'm doing it for fun. So I get to do whatever I want. That's like kind of ultimately the authority on this is like, do I want to do it? And I have very much wanted to talk about this in a public setting some way, one way or the other. I want to have a spot where I can kind of touch in on stuff that I find is interesting about China. I'll probably bring Chanch back in for more of this stuff. We didn't even get into like we should do like a Michael Hudson podcast, like just a
Yeah,
full
definitely.
on deep dive history of
Just,
Michael Hudson.
just do super imperialism.
Yeah, let's do super imperialism, stuff like that. It's like this is the stuff that I find very interesting, and I am fully aware that I'm a huge dork and that it might be boring to some people, but
Well, I'm
I
very
hope.
much looking forward to people getting very mad about this podcast. So thank you very
No,
much. If my
that's a,
experience on the internet is anything to go back on, is that this is going to create some very angry people. That
honestly, if this podcast doesn't create a lot of angry people telling us that, China's not communist and that it's actually just state capitalism and it's actually bad, if it doesn't create a
well,
bunch of
yeah.
people yelling at us about this, then our theory of the case is true, that the sentiments towards China are changing because that has been my evidence online forever. It's like every time I say anything positive, it is shouted down by a bunch of people that are very upset. And I get it. It's fun to be it's fun to be mad online. I am not the kind of person that can ever wag my finger. Somebody who wants to get mad online. I've done it plenty of times. I'm just saying that, like, I do think that the reaction to this podcast will, like, could kind of prove our point to some extent. But I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
That's kind of it. I think that's kind of it. Chanch, I'll get back on the next time. This was sparked because, Trump's over in
Trump's in
Beijing
China.
right now. He's in Beijing right now. And the thing is like, he's doing a thing that I've been saying is somewhat inevitable. Maybe we'll talk about this on the next one, is like
Yeah, I think we should
my
definitely
idea of,
some time.
yeah, but it's like
Hapaboria.
the ultimate Hapaboria, the ultimate idea being that like we should take all of the fake financial money that we have in the United States and just give it to China to build infrastructure in the United States. Because if there's going to be a multipolar world and you get to pick your teams, because we basically have the first pick in a pickup basketball game for multipolarity, like who do we want to be our teammate? And it's like, dude, let's pick China. Let's go, like, let's work together with China. I think it's like an inevitability, honestly. But that's
We're
something we can
like
talk about more.
we're like Mr. Despena picking first and pick up basketball. Where we don't contribute anything, but we get to pick the best
But we
guy.
got first pick, baby.
Yeah, so
Every
we're
once in a while,
winners.
chuck a three from Steph Curry range.
Every U.S. China negotiation, I'm only going to envision as Mr. Despena and LeBron James playing pickup basketball.
I think that's a perfect place to end this thing.
Yeah.
Anything? Do you have anything to plug? I don't think you have plug. Are you still working on that short movie?
Yeah, that'll get done in 2028, probably. Yeah.
Give the people something to read. Give them a book to read. Something simple.
Uh, Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. uh,
Read Infinite Jest, kids. I love that
yeah.
book.
Well,
That's another podcast we could do. Is the Infinite Jest podcast.
yeah,
Oh,
we
we
should.
could.
I
Everyone's gonna
listened
hate
to
us.
Infinite Just to go to yeah. This is gonna get clipped and it's like you want the Nightmare Blunt rotation.
That might be the name of these. That
Yeah.
might be the name of this segment. Chanch Brothers Nightmare Blunt
Wow.
Rotation.
That perfect. We could just this is
Uh,
to find your most socially repulsive guest with the weirdest opinion. We should have Nick Land on.
literally,
Yeah.
it should just be us. Like we are the Nightmare Blunt Rotation. We are the
Yeah.
ones that you don't want to smoke with at all. So love that.
All
Love
right.
that. Oh my god.
That's it. Yeah.
All right,
Nightmare
dude.
Blunt rotation is perfect.
That's it.
Godspeed.
I'll say podcast. Stay on for like a second.